Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're here with the Acolyte episode 7 entitled Choice. Speaking very candidly, myself and the archivist who's joined me yet again, we're not big fans of the Acolyte show.
No.
If you are a fan of the Acolyte show and you're enjoying what, we're being given with this, this is probably not a review for you, frankly. I don't have a lot of positive things to say about the Acolyte, and that's not trying to imply that if you like the Acolyte that you shouldn't, or you're dumb or misinformed. I don't think that at all. But just a disclaimer, I don't have a lot of positive things to say. The archivist doesn't have a lot of positive things to say.
Not
and
this
if this is a review that doesn't really suit your fancy or will get on your nerves because of our opinion and that somehow, affecting your enjoyment of the show, I don't want that to happen. With that said, though, let's keep things as respectful as possible. If you don't like the show, maybe some of the points that we'll have today, you'll find an agreement with. But I just wanted to get that out of the way. I know a lot of people are enjoying the show, but at the same time, we have a responsibility here at the channel to share our honest opinion. And the day that we don't do that is the day that the channel, loses what it means to me and what it represents to me. So we're going to be honest. We didn't like the Acolyte. If that's something that offends or gets on your nerves, maybe find another video. I'm sure you guys can find one that will go into all the lore and stuff that they really enjoyed, but this one might not be for you. So, with that said, overall thoughts on the episode, I view a lot of this series generally as a waste. Not only a waste of time and a waste of storytelling on behalf of the viewers' interest and investment, but also just a waste of time in the approach that this story has been told. Episode 7 is entirely a flashback scene. Unfortunate because large swaths of the episode is stuff that was covered in episode 3 of The Acolyte. We're given a lot of information that is just simply retreaded. And when you do this and you release 2 episodes that are explaining to the audience the exact same information in an 8-episode long season, that's just a massive problem. That's coming out to 25% of the entire story of the show. A big portion of that is information that we already have, and unfortunately, because of that, large portions of this episode are just a drag. It's stuff that we've seen before. Obviously, we learned that Master Soul was there on Brendok when he encountered Osha and May, and the only new piece of information that we have is that maybe Master Soul is given some info that the witches are more nefarious than their true selves are. But again, this isn't necessarily new information. That's something that you can glean from episode 3. And what should have happened is, if this is the story that they're going with, they really should have merged these 2 episodes together. And you may say like, oh, they have a lot of stories and they want to reveal things in due time. But these episodes are not very long either. It's an 8-episode series, but each of these episodes, this being the longest one, the total new screen time comes out to something like 36 minutes, which is just really disappointing for the amount of money that's been behind this project, and even more so as a fan, the amount of anticipation that's been behind this project. The fact that there is just so little to do with the Sith that we're getting into. They'd rather introduce this new Force cult that is just like a lame diet version of the Night Sisters. And it's just not moving the story along very well at all. And the story itself is exceptionally short. Is this the worst episode of The Acolyte? I spoke with the archivist. I think this may be his least favorite episode. I still think episode 3 and then last week's episode, where I just am not getting a lot of enjoyment out of it. But, we're a Star Wars YouTube channel, so we're invested in the franchise. We want to see the franchise flourish and be successful. I think that's something that can be lost in translation, is that we as fans, we want Star Wars to do well. We want interesting stories. And when, Disney is releasing a really good product, I have no problem supporting that product, both on the channel and with my own wallet and time. but this is just not it for me. And I realized that it could be it for other people or younger viewers. Not that the viewership is necessarily indicating that. The viewership numbers for The Acolyte came out earlier this week, and for a show that has twice the budget of Obi-Wan, it is also pulling in almost half the viewers, which is just poor performance. And I want to take this moment to bring up a tweet that I saw today that I thought was really well said and sort of encapsulates how I feel about The Acolyte and, in a lot of respects, a lot of the things that Disney is putting their money and time into when producing Star Wars content. This comes from Roberto Blake on Twitter, who is a content creator advisor, and he just wrote, "Doubling down stubbornly isn't working for Disney Star Wars. You either make a product for your audience or you're making a product to spite your haters. It is that simple." And I just feel that The Acolyte is the embodiment of this is a project to spite people that disagree with our version of Star Wars. And we're going to lean so far heavily into that we're not going to deliver what mass audiences would want to see. Now, is there an argument that maybe The Acolyte isn't for the mass Star Wars audiences? I mean, I guess maybe, but isn't Disney's, wish for Star Wars for it to flourish? Why wouldn't they want to make a project that appeals to so many people? With this rant out of the way, mini rant, rant may be a poor word because I'm trying not to come off as aggressive or dismissive of anything, but more so just airing my grievances. Let's go ahead and get into the actual episode itself rather than the dialogue surrounding the episode. And I've been talking a lot, The Archivist, so what did you think, man? What do you think of the state of The Acolyte, the series thus far going into the finale next week? What did you think of Episode 7, Choice?
Abysmal. That is the word that I have. I think I might have enjoyed this one. I think it's my second least favorite. I would say Episode 3 is still pretty awful. But this one, I guess, appropriately, going back to that flashback and revisiting, it's just as bad. I think the only redeeming quality is that I mildly enjoyed the fight between Sol, Kelnaka, and Torben. I mean, who's not going to like seeing a Wookiee, go ham with a lightsaber? I mean, that's a crowd pleaser, easy win there. It's just, oh my gosh, everything around it was just so bad. I'm trying to think of something to say that's clever, I just...
I know the struggle. You mentioned earlier that a lot of the fight scenes of The Acolyte are cool and even interesting, but the second that it returns to the writing and the characters, the show really plummets. And this is something that we've been saying about The Acolyte, is that the action sequences and some of the set pieces are entertaining, but there's large portions of time where you're just having to deal with the writing, the story, and the characters. And unfortunately, that being one of the more important aspects of any story, this is really where it falls. Yeah, falls flat.
I mean, if I have any one good thing to say, is that the guy who plays Torben, I mean, he was weaving his lightsaber. I enjoyed seeing him deflect the arrows. I think he really, did his homework on that one. As usual, that's only a praise to the choreography, though, and not exactly anything else.
Some of the actors are delivering decent performances despite the writing. I thought the actor that played Torben, who we know from Game of Thrones, did a pretty good job with what he was given.
Yeah.
And then Carrie-Anne Moss, it was awesome as Indara, I think. I don't think that their little tussle between her and Sol at the end made a lot of sense, and I know that really annoyed you.
It did. All right, I'm back here. So at the end, all the Jedi are kind of upset and they're very traumatized by the entire experience, all things that are totally understandable. But as they're kind of, Indara and Sol are like in this sort of what now conversation regarding Osha and the council, and I forgot exactly what their conversation was about, but Sol goes to walk past her, and then Indara instigates this little slapping fight between them that the Padawan, Torben, had to break up. And I was like, Jedi don't act this way. Like, I get most characters, it's a dramatic moment, their tensions are high, emotions are high, it makes sense that infighting might happen. But Jedi don't yell at each other, Jedi don't fight between each other, that just doesn't happen. Especially like after everything is calmed down. And I know that there's probably, I can be proved wrong by some sort of comic or whatever, but usually those characters that yell at each other, like Anakin or whoever, they have a past precedent of letting their emotions kind of run contrary to the Jedi way. But Indara, throughout the whole episode, was shown to be the one with the level head, the one of reason. She calms Sol down when he starts getting kind of emotional about seeing the mistreatment of an innocent. He sees Osha being led down this dark path as a sort of what's the word? A mistreatment of a child. He's like, I have to save this child from what these witches are trying to bring her into. And he feels a sense of justified, indignance about that. And of course that causes him to get a little emotional, and then Indara has to rein him in. But in the end, it's Indara that instigates a physical confrontation with a fellow Jedi. That is disgraceful. I don't care who you are, man.
I actually kind of liked Indara. I don't like that scene, but I liked Indara.
Indara's fine, but that scene sucks.
I just picture Anakin and Obi-Wan entering into like a sort of slap fight in the Clone Wars.
That's so funny that you bring that up. Even to Jedi that, traditionally kind of butt heads a lot, Obi-Wan and Anakin don't, get into that. They might have a little, they might snip at each other here and there. And Anakin might get smart and Obi-Wan to say something sassy back, or they'll get into an outright argument. But they don't, physically confront each other until Mustafar.
Yeah. I was sort of thinking at Jedi Survivor when Dagan and the other Jedi that is with him, and they have sort of their altercation that leads to Dagan getting his arm cut off. Mm-hmm. But again, Dagan Gera was jeopardizing a ton of lives. This was not just a small disagreement. This was like a big scale thing, which that makes more sense. But whenever Anakin raises his voice at Obi-Wan is very quick to correct. Especially in like Attack of the Clones, where he screams at Anakin to come to his senses as they're about to go confront Dooku, or even earlier. Yeah, well, that's a very intense moment too. But to your point, Anakin concedes to his master's counsel in that moment, and moves on. And you're right; they don't ever even come to blows until the very, very end, because that's just kind of not what Jedi do. But this is an intense situation. But for two very composed Jedi, it sort of seems out of character. Master Sol has a flare of anger within him, but he also is very compassionate and understanding. And again, I want to say that I enjoyed the character of Master Sol, and I enjoyed the characters of Indara and even Torben, but their screen time is really limited, and it's bogged down by information that we already know through the episode. And in my opinion, the just less compelling story of Osha and May. I don't find either of them compelling. I oftentimes with the Acolyte find everything that is revolving around them easily twice as compelling as anything that has to do with them. But because the show is the Acolyte, and because Osha and May are our main characters, it always comes back around to them, and it always, takes a dip in my enjoyment. I just think that the performances aren't great. Again, these are kid actors, child actors, so we got to give them a break. There's a level of, leeway there. But in terms of their adult actors also, don't think that they're doing a good job. Or actor, not actors. With all that said, there's not a lot of lore to get into here, but
No.
let's briefly go into it. They say that life is on the planet because of a vergence, which to Legends fans and people that read a lot of Legends material, they will refer to that as a nexus. And a vergence and nexus and canon essentially mean the same things. Typically a location, very rarely a person that is extremely strong in typically one aspect of the Force, be it light or dark. An example would be the Dark Side Nexus, the Sith Shrine below the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. That's a Dark Side Nexus. And then if you want a more obscure one, Malachor 5 that created Darth Nihilus is also a Dark Side Nexus, and Nihilus sort of becomes the embodiment of that Nexus, which we're actually planning on making a video all about, like, the truly terrifying aspect of Nihilus. But back to the Acolyte. What other lore was there? I thought it was interesting that Indara brought up contacting the Council, and after 7 episodes of just Jedi dying and chaos, I was glad that someone finally brought up contacting the Council. I know that the Acolyte writers were going out of their way very purposefully. They said not to have cameos, so I sort of respected the restraint of not having Yoda show up briefly in a hologram, but at the same time, maybe I would have liked to see him. Who knows? Depends on how it was executed. Probably poorly. The thing that got on my nerves about this episode in particular, and about the overarching plot, because it all goes back to Brandok and what occurred there, I feel like a lot of this could have been solved with a simple discussion with very level-headed minds. And I talked a little bit to you about this, but the Jedi are protectors and peacekeepers of the galaxy in large part due to their gifts in diplomacy and discussion. In fact, as we saw before, and as people have pointed out with this era of the Jedi, they're very slow to pull upon their lightsaber because they need to use those skills of diplomacy, negotiation to get to a resolution that is good for both parties. That's the Jedi way to do things. That is their minds and their words and their very presence is as much a tool in their ultimate goal of peace and harmony in the galaxy as their lightsabers are, which is why it can be really frustrating when these seasoned Jedi appear to be so poor at just having a conversation with these witches. And then by the same token, the witches are very aggressive to the Jedi. They make comments to the Jedi about them being peaceful and seeking, a betterment of the galaxy. So the witches are aware of a Jedi's path and their ultimate goal, which is peace and harmony. But at the same time, they actively decide to be the aggressors. They raise arms against the Jedi. The thing that I think kicks it all off that is extremely egregious is that Mother Anastasia possesses the young Padawan Torben, which we already saw in the previous episodes. But these witches just seem incapable of having a simple diplomatic conversation, to the point where even if Master Anastasia had just walked out to Master Soul and been like, I don't agree with the way that you have entered our home, but with that said, I wish to shed no blood. And by the way, Osho would love to be trained as a Jedi. None of that would have ever gone south. These are words. They don't even need the Force. They're just words.
I want to talk about that, right? What happened with Torben. That is blatant instigation. And we've talked about this before. The Jedi were well within their rights to retaliate in that moment. And you brought this up. You said Anakin never would have stood for that. If that happened, like, to Ahsoka, if he were on that mission, his blade would be at Anastasia's throat so fast. Like, there's just no way that they should have let that slide. And if, and of course, I guess looking at the situation directly, they were surrounded and everything, but Anastasia as a character doesn't make a lot of sense, because at the very end, not at the very end, but like in the moment when Soul, like right before he stabs her, when she decides to evaporate in a plume of black smoke like she's about to do something, understandably, he reacts because he thinks she's about to possess a little girl And the thing about it was, she was about to do something. And when he stabs her, she has this little moment where she's like, oh, I was about to let Osha go. Oh, it's like, and I'm like, okay, well then what were you about to do? What were you just right now about to do? I'm sorry?
Because Coriel does that and she possesses Kelnaka.
Yes!
And it looks the exact same. So
yes!
Mother Anastasia, I don't know how possessing some child would get her point across better. I
have no idea.
Maybe the writers have something that they came up with behind the scenes, or maybe they don't. Who knows?
And what, are they supposed to reveal that in the final episode of the season? This was supposed to be the series.
Yeah, the penultimate episode.
Like, just kind of like thinking about this, I don't know what Anastasia was about to do, but clearly it was, we get to see what that would have looked like whenever Coriel possesses Kelnaka. You got like all the witches coming together to hold him under their spell, which it only required a single Jedi to liberate his mind. And of course, we've seen some Jedi do that before. I kind of made a quick note comparing what Indara did to something that Nomi Sunrider does in Legends. How she's able to cut through dark side spells and either destroy Sith illusions or liberate minds, or at least interrupt the connection of a mind being affected by the dark side. So, I mean, it was cool seeing some of those affect mind abilities, seeing the strength that Jedi have. And you pointed this out. It was pretty amusing that all the witches would sit down and decide to perform a spell inside of a burning castle that, this is going to cause all of them to pass out should it fail, which it did.
Yeah, maybe don't enter into a trance that can knock you out when your home is on fire, is what I wrote in my notes.
That's it. As far as how I think this episode is heading, I think next week's episode is going to be an absolute mess. I know we'll get into that in just a minute, but yeah.
You predicted that it will be an all-out convoluted sprint to an abrupt end.
Yep. Yeah.
I don't know why like these flashback episodes just have bogged down the pace of this whole show. And the pacing was already a big struggle after last week. You have a big moment where things finally happen with Kymir introducing himself and revealing that he's a dark side wielder or a Sith. I'm tired of dancing around what he is. He said he was like a Sith. Okay, I'm going to call him a Sith. And all of that, tension and drama just comes to a screeching halt. We were braking last week. We were going fast. We were going down the highway and we started braking. But this episode is just the car hitting a wall in terms of, pacing.
You're so right. The problem is like, my problem with this episode is it was everything I hated about episode 3. What was interesting was after episode 3, and we got all of our complaints about that out of our system, I was willing to forget about it all because the show had moved on. It was doing other things. We were talking about the lightsaber fights. We had some bad episodes that were just bad due to boring dialogue and stuff like that. But then you got this episode, which goes back to everything that I hated about episode 3 and doubles down on it, focusing on it all the more. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
And I honestly think
it's so sad. I want to like this. I want to like the Acolyte. I was so excited for the Acolyte too, and I thought the premise was so smart to enter this period of time where the Sith are in hiding and to reframe these galactic conflicts. And I see that the show is trying to do that, not in the way that it was pitched, but it's trying to reframe these galactic conflicts like maybe the Jedi are fallible and maybe they do make mistakes, but we already know that. I thought this was going to be from the point of view of, the Sith are the underdogs and they're rising up beneath the nose of the Republic and the Jedi. And if you go back and you watch all these interviews, that's what they're constantly talking about. But that is just not the story that we've gotten at all. It's just a confusing project through and through for me.
I've got two things to say. One about the flashbacks. Flashbacks seem to be this really weird constant in a lot of Disney, recent Disney Star Wars projects. You had them in Kenobi, you had them in Book of Boba Fett, and you have them here. The flashbacks in Kenobi were only good because they took place in the Clone Wars era, with Anakin and Obi-Wan being the focus of them, and they didn't really last that long. But then you had, like the Book of Boba Fett, with entire episodes dedicated to flashbacks, and the problem there persists here, where, like you said, it stops the pace dead in its tracks and calls back to something that we don't care about.
Yeah. I think Ahsoka handled its quote-unquote flashbacks extremely well. Because the difference is that those flashbacks are extremely relevant to the story, and it adds to the mysticism of the Force and Anakin, the main character.
And of course, I would. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I thought that it was handled really well in Ahsoka, and to use that as a good example of Star Wars calling upon the past to illustrate the moment.
Yeah, and Ahsoka, I feel like, is different because it wasn't just a flashback. It wasn't just like, okay, and now we're jumping 16 years earlier to the, whatever. It had a point because within the flashback, you had the modern consciousness of Anakin and Ahsoka inhabiting their younger bodies in this really poetic revisitation of these important moments in their history. So, like you say, it's different because it works.
Yeah.
But my second complaint has everything to do about Mother Coral. I can't stand Mother Coral. I'm just going to be honest as a character. Every time she's on screen, I just cringe. And she does a lot of like this weird screaming voice in this episode. And every time she does it, I just kind of laugh because she sounds ridiculous.
She's also shaping up to be very important in the finale.
Yep. Going to go ahead and address the bantha in the room, as it were.
I know there are theories out there that Coral is Darth Plagueis, or like some Sith aspirant as well as Chimere, but that's a can of worms. Let's open that next week, man.
Okay.
Let's wait and see how that
Holding
plays
off on
out.
that one.
I was gonna say, typically characters and stories are far more compelling when they are of a different opinion of a certain outcome or situation, but that both characters are equally well informed. Just using a Star Wars example, Anakin knows that the Sith are bad, but he knows that he loves his wife, and he knows that he wants to protect the Republic. And because of that, in his opinion, the Jedi have betrayed him and betrayed his ideals and his desires to no longer even have his wife and to withhold this power that could potentially save him. Anakin's turn is interesting not because he lacks information, but because he has all of the information. And you can even equate that to Obi-Wan too. Obi-Wan realizes that Anakin made these decisions because he thinks he should have a right to rule the Republic because he's the chosen one and because he's that powerful, and that he's been corrupted and seduced by the dark side because of the power that it offers him. Obi-Wan realizes that completely. So when the two characters confront one another on Mustafar, they both have a perfect understanding of the other person's stance in that moment. They just fundamentally disagree with it. And if you compare that writing to the writing in The Acolyte, where characters are just missing large gaps of information that could be very easily fixed through a simple conversation, and yet that doesn't happen, it just makes it so uninteresting, especially because as an audience member, sometimes you're just looking at the screen screaming, all of this could be stopped by sharing your own viewpoint. And typically in a normal show, you can say, oh, the characters are, they've made their mind up. But characters in normal shows are not Jedi. Jedi are trained diplomats. They're trained to find, peaceful resolutions as a first, second, and third option. And only, as a fourth option, did they rely on their lightsaber. And as we tried to illustrate in our video earlier today, even when a Jedi takes out their lightsaber, that doesn't mean that they're not seeking a peaceful, harmonic resolution. They just have to use that specific tool in a way to reach an outcome when that wouldn't be the first option that they would, inherently want to pull on. But here, it just seems like a peaceful resolution is not the first priority on the Jedi's mind, nor the Witches of Brendok. And I just didn't enjoy the episode.
No, I remember this one writing tip that I found a long time ago about how to properly write a fight scene so that it's compelling. And the advice was that a fight is oftentimes only really compelling if there is no other choice but to fight. Exactly what you said there. If a situation can be resolved through talking it out, then it's not a compelling enough confrontation. And you said it perfectly with Anakin and Obi-Wan. Both of them had full knowledge. Anakin, even, as far as like Legends content that we've talked about before, he knew fully that the Sith were evil, and he even had plans to destroy them after he got what he wanted. But, it's like the dark side warping his mind in that moment, and he knew everything, he just didn't care. But yeah, not to just completely requote everything you just said, but it's this episode.
Good. You said it really well.
It's just like this episode. It's everything that I had kind of expected it to be, and I sat down on my couch about to watch it, and for the first time watching anything Star Wars, I just kind of groaned when I hit the play button, and I was like, let's just get this over with. And man, when it was done, I was just like, I'm looking forward to next week, because then after that it'll be over. But I am not expecting next week to be anything but a haphazard limping sprint to the finish with things, because I think Leslie Headland said this. They said at the end they wanted it to feel like an emotional conclusion to the story, but they still wanted to leave some things open-ended in case there's a second season. I will personally eat my own shoe with a knife and fork if this thing gets a second season. That's thing number one. And thing number two is the whole idea of leaving some things open-ended. The only thing I'm hearing is copious amounts of plot holes.
Maybe. Yeah. Let's judge that next week. And then, You know what I think we should do? I think that after the Acolytes concluded, we should give it a week, maybe even do like a rewatch and come back with a full detailed review of the first season.
Oh, you want me to watch this all over again?
Pretty please.
Oh, man.
If that's something that you guys would like to see, please request it down below and convince the archivist that his suffering will be rewarded.
I guess
in terms
like a
of
Sith
other
apprentice,
stuff,
I'll use the pain for power.
Yeah, there you go. So a few things I wanted to just briefly touch on before we sign off. I still like Master Soul. I was worried that these last two episodes were going to destroy his character, but he always stays pretty close to what is established prior. He's pretty understanding. He's more emotional than most Jedi, which is something that I appreciate. And I thought his decision not to fight back against Mother Coriel because of his instant regret of killing Mother Anastasia, no matter how preventable it was a moment where I connected with Master Soul, and I felt like he was acting extremely Jedi-like, which is something that I enjoyed. I also liked his decision to save Osha instead of May at the end. I think that May's hatred of Master Soul, again, could be solved with a conversation, but they haven't had that conversation, so the hatred is there. is understandable. If I were going to write the show, I would have May and Master Soul come to an understanding at the end of the final episode, and again have our characters switch places, which I think is what's going to ultimately happen. Again, I think the show struggles massively with payoff, with setup and payoff. For the first 6 episodes of the show, we've been led to believe that May lighting the fortress or castle on fire was something done out of malice and anger, when here it was an accident. I think a lot of us saw that coming, but to treat that as like some sort of massive reveal, I just found to be really underwhelming.
Yeah. You know, man, I actually, whenever I saw that, I was like, man, in any other show, this might have been a big reveal, but here it just feels like another slap in the face, because I'm like, I think it drives home the failure that May was as a Sith apprentice and the failure of this show to produce a proper Sith apprentice story, because it, in a certain way, her psychopathic behavior was compelling if she were to eventually become a Sith apprentice. But to show that it was all an accident, at least in my eyes, was like, from the very beginning, she was not fit to train under the Sith. You know, she was weak from the very start. I say weak, like, from the perspective of a Sith. So it's like, you know, her actions in the previous episode now are a little bit more understandable, but it doesn't mean that her, like, flip-flopping of her goals makes any less or more sense. I still think that May overall is a very weak character, and this reveal didn't do anything to help that.
Yeah. Do you think it's my own Disney headcanon that Leslie Headland, Dave Filoni, and a whole bunch of other people sat down in a meeting and they were like, Leslie said, I want to make the girls' midichlorian count 25,000 each. And then Dave Filoni was like, that would be higher than Anakin's. You can't do that. And then she was like, what if we just don't give a number then? It's just...
Okay, so I was actually thinking about that soon. Whenever they started talking about the midichlorian count, which they insist on saying M count again, I was like, okay, let's hear the number. What's it going to be? Are you going to compare it to Anakin's?
I had my fingers crossed that they wouldn't say a number, and I was glad that they didn't.
I am too. They were wise this time to step around that. Otherwise, you know, all chaos would have broken loose again.
Yeah, I don't think, talking about the in-universe of Star Wars at this time, I don't think it was anything higher than Yoda's. Yoda, again, is a super prominent figure still. He's one of the Grand Masters. Actually, there are 3 Grand Masters serving in the time of the High Republic, if you didn't know.
Yeah.
And he's one of them. But I'm glad that they didn't have a reaction of, oh, their midichlorian count is even higher than Yoda's, because that was Qui-Gon's reaction. Or was it Obi-Wan that said that?
Obi-Wan
said that, yeah. So I'm glad that they didn't give a number.
Yeah, according to like the Tenebrous Way, apparently a midichlorian count of 15,000 is considered very high already. So it's my headcanon that they were probably around somewhere like there.
So maybe not quite a Yoda, but approaching.
Right.
Well, that's pretty much all I have to say, man.
Me too.
To the listeners, thank you guys for sticking with us over this journey. I hope you guys have been enjoying our reviews. We absolutely love hearing your feedback and talking about the reasons why you like the Acolyte, why you didn't like the Acolyte. It's just a big honor that anyone would even care about our Star Wars opinions anyway. So we thank you greatly.
It is. It really is.
And I found a sense of appreciation with the video that we posted earlier where, you know, some people were disagreeing with our takes on the Acolyte and lightsaber combat and just thinking, man, we're really blessed because we can make something and have it reach sort of beyond an echo chamber and really reach out to all those people that enjoy Star Wars. And even if we disagree, I just want to say that I truly appreciate that. And I know the Archivist does as well.
I really do. I mean, hey, you guys actually know who Stupendous Wave is. You know, I kind of came on just kind of out of nowhere, and you guys have been super supportive and super welcoming to me. So I want to say a big thank you that you guys have listened to my voice, have accepted and responded to some of my opinions. And even though this episode I had a lot of negative ones, I think I'm still really happy that I get to be on here with, the Stupendous Wave and get to actually talk on this channel about Star Wars. It's really, really cool.
Yeah, we love you guys. Thank you so much. All right, now it's your turn. What did you guys think of The Acolyte Episode 7 choice? Are you enjoying the series? Are you not enjoying the series? What are your thoughts on Star Wars as a whole? And I'm just going to ask it, man. Is Corral a Sith Lord? Is Master Corral going to be revealed as a Sith Lord? Leave your thoughts in the comments down below. I'd love to hear how you would tie it all together. I hope not. That's how I feel.
Yeah.
But if she is, so be it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching. May the Force be with you. Have a wonderful evening or morning or whenever you watch this. Bye-bye.